It was the peculiar stench of old coffee mixed with the unmistakable scent of decay that first caught me off guard when I walked into the rundown security office. The job was simple enough: a night officer at an abandoned mall, a place that had succumbed to the economic downturn and now stood as a bleak monument to better times. The pay was decent, especially for a night owl like myself who'd rather avoid the daytime hustle. The office was cluttered. Stacks of yellowed papers and dusty manuals made towers on a desk that seemed as old as the mall itself. The only other furniture was a threadbare chair and a lopsided wooden filing cabinet, which looked like it could topple over if you breathed too hard near it. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed incessantly, as if protesting its continued use in such a forgotten place. Gary, the retiring night officer, a wiry man with spectacles too big for his face, was the only soul I met that night. "You'll find it's quiet, too quiet sometimes. That'll get to you," he remarked as he handed over a set of keys, each one tagged but with faded labels that made little sense. "Here are the rules," he continued, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his shirt pocket. "Follow them. They're important for reasons you don't want to find out." I unfolded the paper, which felt as brittle as autumn leaves, and read the typewritten lines. 1. Keep all doors locked, always, even if you hear knocking from the inside. 2. Never, under any circumstances, go into the old electronics store. Keep it locked and ignore any sounds coming from it. 3. If you see any lights flickering in the food court, do not investigate. Turn off the main power from your office immediately. 4. Between 2:00 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., stay in the security office and do not look at the monitors. 5. If someone calls over the intercom asking for help, do not respond. No one else should be here. 6. Always wear the provided amulet. Do not take it off during your shift. With each rule, my eyebrows arched a bit higher. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, half expecting Gary to start laughing and reveal a hidden camera. "No joke," he assured me deadpan. "Those came from trial and error, mostly error. My last piece of advice: take the rules seriously." He left without another word, leaving me with the echoes of his footsteps and a growing sense of unease. I decided to do a walk around, familiarize myself with my new nocturnal home. The mall was huge, its vast corridors now echoing hollow and eerie under the cold, flickering light of failing fluorescent bulbs. Storefronts loomed like dark caverns, gated and padlocked. The air was cool and still, carrying a faint, unplaceable odor that was neither pleasant nor entirely repulsive, just wrong. When I passed by the old electronics store, I felt a chill. The glass was so dust-covered it seemed opaque, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something on the other side was watching. The hairs on the back of my neck stood at attention as I hurried past, reminding myself of Rule 2. As I circled back to the security office, the quiet was suffocating, as if the night was holding its breath. I settled into the ancient chair, resolved to make the best of my shift. That's when I noticed it. The amulet Gary mentioned was lying on the desk. A simple thing, a metallic disc on a worn leather strap, unremarkable yet strangely imposing as it sat there. With a sigh, I picked it up and fastened it around my neck. Exactly at 2:00 a.m., a soft tapping started. It came from the monitors, the black and white feeds showing different parts of the mall. I should not look, Rule 4, but the tapping grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, tapping that resonated in my chest, echoing the frantic beating of my heart. I clutched the amulet, suddenly ice cold against my skin, staring at the darkened screen of the powered-down monitors, wondering if I had just made the worst job decision of my life. The weight of the amulet, now frigid as if dipped in winter's first frost, was a sharp contrast to the heat prickling at the back of my neck. My eyes, adjusting to the pitch darkness that enveloped the office, darted around frantically, hungry for any stitch of light. An unsettling silence had rolled in like fog, filling the air as the monitors had clicked off. Every distant creak or whisper of movement seemed amplified, carrying the weight of ominous intent. I could feel the tingling sensation crawling up my spine, my skin imperceptibly twitching in anticipation of a threat yet unseen. The logical part of my brain nudged at me, suggesting I stand, walk to the door, leave this all behind for the night. But something deeper, more elementary, held me rooted to the spot. There was a gravity in the air, as if the building itself was breathing shallowly, holding back something catastrophic. With a shaky breath, I whispered, "Hello." My voice evaporated into the void unanswered. The amulet grew colder, searing against my chest like a chunk of nighttime sky. It was absurd, this sudden chill, yet I couldn't bring myself to remove it. Instead, I tightened my grip, the edges biting into my palm. I tried to rise from my chair, but a sudden flicker of movement on one of the darkened screens caught my attention. I leaned in, squinting, unsure if I had actually seen anything or if my frazzled nerves were playing tricks on me. That's when I heard it, a soft, dragging sound from just outside the office door. It was slow, deliberate, like cloth brushing against the carpet. I froze, breath caught in my throat. In my peripheral vision, the screen flickered again. This time I was certain. A shadow had crossed, a distortion in the dark glass. Something or someone was moving out there. The dragging sound stopped abruptly. Silence reigned once more, thick and suffocating. My heart pounded so loud I feared it might betray my presence to whoever, or whatever, lurked just beyond. The air felt charged, heavy with impending dread. Compelled by a force I couldn't understand, I reached out and powered on the nearest monitor. The sudden bloom of light felt intrusive, obscene against the surrounding blackness. The screen was filled with static, crackling white and black that buzzed quietly. But behind the static, something else was forming. Shapes. Moving, swirling shapes that almost resembled human figures. My eyes wide, I watched as they twisted and turned, a grotesque dance of shadows. As they moved, a low murmur filled the room, rising from the speakers. It was a garbled mess of sounds, whispering, overlapping, as if several people were speaking all at once, desperate to be heard. The noises scratched at my brain, pulling my thoughts in 1,000 directions. I turned, ready to flee, but my gaze caught on something that froze me yet again. My shadow on the opposite wall was distorting. Growing taller, stretching, the edges shimmering slightly as if licked by unseen flames. My body felt heavy, uncooperative, as I watched my own silhouette transform into something unrecognizable. Then a slow, painful creak came from the door behind me. It was opening, incrementally, torturously slow. A sliver of dim light from the hallway crept in, cutting through the blackness, illuminating dust motes suspended in terror. And there, in the crack of the door, the smallest hint of a silhouette. Not fully revealed, just suggested. A presence poised on the threshold. My breath hitched, and the shadow on the screen seemed to pulse faster, as if excited. The murmuring increased in volume, becoming a cacophony of desperate sounds. I was paralyzed, watching the door creep open inch by dreadful inch. What lay beyond was still shrouded in shadow, but my mind filled in the blanks with every horror it could conjure. The amulet burned against my skin, a beacon of cold fire in the creeping dread. My lips parted to scream, but no sound emerged as the door finally swung open with agonizing lethargy to reveal the nothingness. No, not nothingness, but something far worse than I could have imagined. A void where reality seemed to warp, a darkness deeper than night. And from that dark, a hand extended, its form blurred and shifting, reaching for the space between us, reaching for me. As the hand emerged from the void, each finger tapering into impossible lengths, I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the ragged carpet, and fell hard against the cold, unyielding floor. Despite my fall, my eyes remained fixed on that blasphemous appendage as it continued to stretch towards me, the space between us charged with an electric dread that made the air feel thick and heavy. The hand's skin, if one could call it skin, rippled like the surface of a disturbed pond, textures undulating between semi-transparency and a deep, glossy black. I felt an oppressive cold radiating from its direction, the sort of cold that didn't just chill the air, but seemed to suck the very heat from my bones. I scrambled backward, pushing with my hands and heels, my breath coming in ragged gasps that did nothing to calm my racing heart. The carpet burned against my palms, but the pain was distant, overshadowed by the stark terror of the reaching hand. I needed to scream, to call for help, but my throat was paralyzed by fear, each attempt to vocalize strangling me with its futility. The room around me began to dim, the edges of my vision blurring as if the darkness itself was encroaching, swallowing the mundane reality of my cheap apartment. The hand paused, as if savoring my horror, and then changed its course with a subtle, horrifying deliberation. It didn't reach for me any longer. It reached around me, as if embracing the air where I should have been. That's when I heard it, an inkling of a sound at first, like the whisper of wind through a crack in a window. The sound grew in clarity, a wet, guttural mumble that seemed both distant and uncomfortably close. I couldn't understand the words, if they were words, but something in the tone felt pleading, despairing. I forced myself to move, to stand, wobbling on unsteady legs. My heart told me to run, to escape this nightmare that had invaded my home, but my mind, twisted with an illogical and deadly curiosity, urged me to understand. I took a hesitant step towards the door, each movement feeling like wading through molasses. As I drew closer, the hand mirrored my movement, retracting slightly, then stopped. It hovered, fingertips twitching erratically like the legs of a dying spider. Without knowing why, I reached out my own hand, a pale imitation of that grotesque limb, and touched the air near it. The contact was nothing like I expected. There was a sensation of electric static, a vibration that traveled up my arm and settled into my chest. My skin crawled with goosebumps, and a nauseating wave of vertigo washed over me, the room tilting precariously. Suddenly, the apartment was just an apartment again. The hand snapped back into the void as if yanked by an unseen cord, and the door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. I was left standing, trembling, in the silence that followed. But it wasn't entirely silent. Now there was a noise coming from behind the door, no, beneath it. A soft, insistent scratching like nails on wood. I backed away, eyes wide, mouth dry. The scratching grew in fervor, desperate, unrelenting. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, it stopped. Silence reigned once more, thick and suffocating. I stood, frozen, breath held, until my lungs ached for air. Just as I dared to breathe, a low, sorrowful moan seeped through the door, stirring the hairs on the back of my neck. The sound wasn't just sad, it was familiar, painfully familiar. It dredged up a memory, a ghost from my past. The voice belonged to my brother, who had vanished without a trace 2 years ago. "Help me," it wept, from the other side of the door, from somewhere beyond my understanding. I gasped, tears flooding my eyes, not just from fear now, but from a deep, aching sadness. The room spun around me as I slumped against the wall, pressing my hands to my temples, trying desperately to hold onto sanity in a world that no longer made sense. The horror was not just the unknown entity behind the door. It was knowing that it could reach out with something so painfully personal, so tragically intimate. I swallowed hard, my breath shallow, and trembling as I pushed myself off the wall. The door before me stood ominously silent now, as if whatever lurked behind it was waiting, feeding off my terror. I couldn't bring myself to move closer, yet I couldn't force my legs to carry me away either. Every fiber of my being screamed to leave, to run from this desecrated house that had once been a sanctuary of love and laughter. But how could I flee when every shattered memory held me here, tethered like a ghost to the remnants of my past life? Heart pounding, I edged closer to the door, whispering my sister's name, a name that the thing behind the door had stolen and twisted into a weapon against my sanity. Mara, my voice was a strangled croak, betrayed by fear. Nothing, only the thick, suffocating silence of the house answered. I reached out a trembling hand towards the doorknob, hesitated, and then grasped it with a determination fueled by desperation. The metal was ice cold, biting into my skin, but the chill was nothing compared to the icy dread filling my stomach. Slowly, almost reverently, I turned the knob. The door creaked open on protesting hinges, revealing the darkness within that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I peered into the void, squinting to make out shapes, any sign of what awaited. And there it was, a faint whisper almost too low to catch. "Stay." I flinched back as if struck, my heart a chaotic drum in my chest. Stay. The entity wanted me here, in this house of haunted memories and broken dreams. Straining my eyes in the darkness, I took a hesitant step inside. The air was thick, heavy with must and mildew, and beneath it, the faint, sickly sweet scent of decay. My hand groped along the wall for a switch, anything that could cast light into these shadows that seemed to coil around my ankles, alive and whispering. Click! The light flickered on, dim and buzzing, struggling against the darkness that wanted to devour it. My eyes darted around the room, heart sinking. The place was in ruins. Furniture lay overturned, wallpaper peeled like decaying skin, and amidst the chaos, small, framed photographs lay shattered on the floor. Each photo was a bullet through my heart. Us as children, smiling at a beach, our family at Christmas, laughing under the twinkling lights, Mara on her graduation day, proud and hopeful. All now broken, trampled under the weight of whatever haunted this place. A sob rose in my throat as I knelt by one frame, the glass cracked across our faces. Then, a shadow moved in my purr. Iffery, panicking, I whipped around. Nothing but the oppressive silence and the furnishings of decay. As I stood, my foot brushed something soft. I looked down to see a doll, its porcelain face staring blankly up at me. Mara's doll, the one she had loved and lost, the one we searched for days to find, only to give up in sorrow. How was it here? "Who are you?" I demanded to the room, to the lurking shadows and whispers. "What do you want from me?" But only silence met my pleas. A silence that seemed to mock, to grin with unseen jaws. I was alone, completely alone, next to memories that were being used as instruments of torture. I should have left then, should have fled the torturous ruins of my past. But the sorrow shackled me, each broken memory a chain, each whisper a shackle. As I stood there, frozen in a tableau of fear and mourning, the air shifted, like a sigh too faint to be heard. And from somewhere deep within the house, the soft, unmistakable giggle of a child echoed, chilling the very marrow of my bones. That giggle, once sweet and familiar, now a distorted echo in the dark corridors of the haunted house, pulled me deeper into the nightmare. I could not leave, not yet, not while the ghost of my sister played in the shadows, her laughter a melody turned macabre.